Hi, teachers. I want to spend just the next couple minutes walking through a presentation on effective, um, I'm sorry, on, on effective pacing. So let me just pull it up and we will go at it here. All right. So this particular topic in this entire unit is on effective pacing strategies for new CTE teachers. I realize some of you may have already taken curriculum design, are currently taking curriculum design, or will take it in the future. So we're all over the place. And in that particular class, we actually create a plan of study for a course. So you don't have to have that prior knowledge in order to effectively pace your instruction. However, I think understanding pacing actually helps you as you develop out your course of study. So they kind of go hand in hand. So just keep that in mind if you happen to be in curriculum design right now. So why pacing matters. So when I talk about pacing, let me say this. Pacing means that I am teaching, I am assessing, and I am planning effectively. And I know that I'm doing it effectively when students are learning and they're able to demonstrate to me not only technical acumen, but academic improvements and professional skills and abilities. So we have all these standards that we have to teach across all three of those areas. And it's a lot. It's a lot to know how I should deliver that content and what strategies I should utilize that are most effective. So later in this course, we're going to look at various strategies that you can use. You're going to continuously look for effective strategies in your classroom. You're going to rely on those that work. And you'll know what works by having effective assessment data. We're also going to look at assessment strategies in a module later on in the semester as well. So again, we're trying to really get to all these foundational skills, and effective pacing really matters. So effective pacing enhances student engagement and understanding, right? So we have a student who understands what their expectations are, that are engaged in their learning, want to be there. Like that's our perfect student, right? Um, it provides flexibility and pacing, accommodates diverse student needs and classroom dynamics. So we're going to look at diverse student needs and differentiation. And when we have effective pacing, we have both the flexibility in the tools, and we are intentional about being differentiated. All right, that's why we get paid the big bucks, right? Is because we're not just a computer program. We understand all these things have to work together. And lastly, consider common challenges covering too much content or understanding or underestimating hands-on activity time. So even I to this day, I'm like, oh man, did I overplan? Did I underplan? So if we have effective pacing, we should be close to being on target. And that comes with time, it comes with reflection. So give yourself some grace in that. But I want us to be intentional about understanding that this really does matter. It matters for your student learning outcomes, and it matters for you as an instructor so you don't go crazy, right? Doing all the job requires. So one of the options that you should really highly consider doing is this concept of called backward design for planning. And I've talked about this before. And I talk about this with assessments. Backward design for planning means to restart with the end in mind. What is it that you want your students to be able to tell you, show you, understand, fundamentally know, right? And before you develop your lesson, before you develop out your curriculum map, before you do any of that, what is it for that unit? What is it for that entire course that a proficient and advanced student will be able to show you and tell you. That's the idea of backward design. You break down those big objectives into smaller, manageable milestones, right? So, for example, if I, teaching business, want my students to be able to develop a holistic business plan, including financials and marketing, product development, operations, right? That's the end goal that they're going to be able to show me. That's the technical part. In addition, they're going to be able to demonstrate strong communication skills and writing skills, right? And so those are some of the academic and professional skills. And so I know that's what I want them to be able to do at the end. So then I take that end goal and I break it into smaller chunks. And then I take those chunks and I break them down into smaller chunks to the point that then my smallest chunk is my individual lesson plan. And maybe that lesson plan spans one day, maybe it spans a week, but that's the way to do it because then I can see how all these things work together to essentially get to where my students I want them to be. So one of the questions I'm going to pose for you in this module after this video is how can you apply backward design in your lesson planning? And I really want you to not just give me a flippant answer on that. I want you to think about what you're teaching right now. I want you to pause and I want you to think, okay, at the end of this unit, I want my students to be able to demonstrate X, Y, and Z. Now, how can I apply those backward design principles? All right, more to come on that in the weeks to come too. Time. Time is never our friend. Some of you with block periods will say, I have too much time. Others of you, which I can sympathize with, I used to have periods that were 40 minutes. Oh, it was like they barely got in the door and I felt like they were running out the door. So consider this is a kind of a generalized rule, the 10-20-30 rule. 10 minutes introduction, prior knowledge connection. Don't just jump into something brand new. Make sure you make a connection to what you've been teaching. Make those connections from the day before. Think and even I'd say dare you even think about this in a bigger picture. And there's a whole bunch of ways that we can do that, but make sure it's intentional from the beginning. Um, Direct instruction or demonstration, right, should be like 20 minutes. That's up to you based on how long of a period of time that you have. And then 30 minutes is a practical application. So practical application doesn't always mean lab. All right, because my business teachers and some of my STEM-based teachers and the graphic design teachers, we're not physically moving into a lab at this point. We might just have practical applications. So it could be scenario based, it can be some sort of assessment. But the idea is that you connect it to prior knowledge, then you're doing your instruction. Maybe that instruction is actually reading. That's perfectly great too on their own. And then 30 minutes of actually application. So another question here is do you currently allocate time in your lessons? And you'll have the opportunity to consider that in coming up. Next is focus on hands-on learning. We do this really well, most of us. So estimated time for hands-on activities using the formula, and this is one idea. It does not have to be, but your estimated time times 1.5 equals your planned time. So you want to integrate brief theoretical lessons during practical tasks. And so it isn't just, they're not separated. Your lab and your theory are related, go together. Please understand that you're actually still teaching when you're in the lab. So a question I have for you is what challenges do you face in balancing theory and practice? And some of us are going to have more challenge with that because our courses themselves are much more theoretically based, like that lesson, building a fake business plan is more going to be challenging to teach that from a practical standpoint than changing the oil in your car. Okay, so that's a question there for you to consider. Planning and monitoring tools. So these are going to be your friends. So use lesson plan templates with time allocations for each phase. When I go out and do teacher observations in the fall, it's a great joy for me to be in your classrooms. But when I see your lesson plans, a lot of times your lesson plans are pretty incomplete. And one of the biggest missing things is that time allocation, right? So um, go back to look at your lesson plan that you're using right now. Are you allocating time buckets for those activities and those learning experiences that you're providing students? If you're not, go ahead and make those revisions. Will you always stick to the time? No, especially in year 1, 2, and 3, when you're still figuring out your instructional strategies and how this is going to work and you're revising things of that nature. By the time you're year 5, you're probably likely like, yeah, I got that timing down a little better. But at least it gives you a realistic bucket to work with, right? And then you can go back and then let's say an activity was supposed to take 20 minutes and it ended up taking 40. That's fine. Make those adjustments in your lesson plan for next year. Okay. So implement timers and checkpoints to stay on track. We all have smart boards. Throw that timer on. That timer is for you and your student because that way they're not messing around and they stay on task. It's an easy thing to do. And yeah, there's no reason not to do it. Share agendas with students to clarify expectations. If you have been with me in classes before, I share that in the practicum class where like, hey, this is what we're going on every day. And then I will sometimes even break that into like, okay, today, this is what we're doing. We're doing X, Y, and Z, and there's a time here, doing time there. Again, it's going to vary a little bit based on the a lot of time you have with students, but that all of that helps to make sure that you have effective pacing. So one of the things you've already learned is that you have to adjust pacing in real time, and please do this. Even my own children, would have conversations with them about, hey, how did school go today? And sometimes they would say, I didn't understand what happened, what I learned in, let's say, chemistry class. And I would say, okay, show me what your materials were, and we'd have a conversation. Now, that happens on one day, fine, everybody has a day. When it happens a lot, then we know the pacing is a problem. So don't keep teaching if your students aren't learning. Let me say that again. Don't keep teaching if your students aren't learning. So I'm going to make my best effort throughout the semester to do like exit tickets, even in this kind of virtual environment, because I want to make sure you understand what I'm trying to teach you. And I'm not going to just push forward unless we understand. Okay. So if you get to the point where you're looking at your students and there's like they're all glossy eyed over, stop. Just stop. Pivot. Do something different. Do a formative assessment. Do whatever you need to make sure that they understand. And if they don't, change it. So signs of pacing issues, confusion or restlessness. I say the restlessness, unless it's first period or ninth period, like sometimes you're just going to get that. Include time buffers in your lesson plans for flexibility. That's where I think sometimes we can go into like having allocated jobs and just, okay, let's stand up. We're going to have our stand up break, right? We're going to have our exercise break. We're going to have a coffee break, whatever, to re-engage that. And my question from adjusting pace in real time is, how do you currently assess student engagement during your lessons? This is huge. And it wasn't something I did effectively out of the gate. So I'd rather you slow things down and teach effectively instead of just, okay, and this is what I plan to do this week, so this is what I've got to do. Slow it down. A pacing cheat sheet. So here's you can allocate time for preparation, activity, debrief. Create some scenario or create some rules like, okay, I don't care that I'm supposed to be on slide 8 and I'm only on slide 3. I'm dedicated to doing a debrief at the end of class every day, right? Things of that nature. Start small and gradually increase project complexity. Um, yes, I love project-based learning. My entrepreneurship class, we had a year-long project-based learning. Most of you ready for that? No, no. You're still figuring out what standards you're teaching. So again, we'll take the crawl, walk, run approach, but start small, and then you'll realize over some time and through reflection how you can make more effective learning experiences for your students. And always leave time for questions and reflections. I was always really bad at this too. Like that bell was ringing and I was like, wait, I was mid-sentence. And I never really sometimes understood those first couple of years of like, what did my students learn, right? I was ready to move on. I had so much exciting things to teach them. Well, I needed to make sure they actually learned what I taught them that day. So make sure that you always leave time for questions and reflection. And it doesn't have to be complicated. It can be a silly little post-it note. It can be a one question in Google Classroom. It can be raise your hand. It can be a whiteboard. It can be whatever that is. But don't be like my daughter's chem teacher where she did comes home and has no clue what she was even supposed to learn that day. All right. I'm going to give you a real world scenario here in this module. So we will skip that. And then really important is reflection and improvement. Conduct post-lesson reviews. And I know some of you will have 4, 5, 6 preps, and you're like, oh, Melanie, I just really need to move on for tomorrow. And you're just working a couple days in advance. I understand, but take a couple minutes, just what went well. You can handwrite on your lesson plan, this went well, don't do this. Did you meet your objectives? If your answer is no, then you know where you need to start the next day. Where did you lose or gain time, right? So you planned on something, it took 5 minutes and it was supposed to take 15. Oh, sugar. Okay, so now I need to make that a little bit stronger. And then use reflections to refine your pacing strategies. Honestly, even in this day of electronics, and I love all the cool stuff tech we can use, I would still recommend at this point that you're printing out all your lesson plans and you have them in your hands. And then at the end of that day, you handwrite on there, and then your reflection. And I would put it in a plastic sleeve, and I would put it in a 3-ring binder. And that way, next year when you get to that same section, you have a better understanding because it will make sense to you. Like draw smiley faces or frowny faces or like cross out in big black marker, what didn't work. And then you can be super hip and cool and do whatever you want. But that is just an easy way to make sure that you are not reinventing the wheel every year because you don't want that for your students and you don't want it for you. All right, that is the end of this presentation. There's a couple more activities that we're going to do. And so let me know how things are going. All right, thank you so much.